Number 10. Deathlok Prime. Deathlok Prime hails from the reality of Earth 10511, where in this future the Roxxon Corporation takes over the world. While not a mutant, he is a member of the X-Force who is also seen as a member of the staff for a short time in the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Deathlok Prime is actually a human cyborg in regards to his origin, but this doesn't stop him from lending his expertise and advice to the students of the Jean Grey School. While there, Deathlok Prime gives a guest lecture and even tells some of the kids what their futures might end up being. Probably based on his own future. He also warns Wolverine about Evan Sabinur, aka Kid Apocalypse, who later takes the code name of Genesis himself. Deathlok Prime says that Evan could either be a hero or a deadly enemy of the mutants. Number 9. Quicksilver. Okay, so a lot of people in the comments for the part 1 of this list really wanted me to include folks like Franklin Richards, aka Powerhouse, Scarlet Witch, and her brother Quicksilver on that list, or on a potential part 2. Here is the problem with that. While Franklin, Wanda, and Pietro were all once considered mutants and yet are no longer, none of them were technically members of the X-Men team, which is why I couldn't really put any of them on that list. Wanda is first and foremost an Avenger and former X-Men villain, but not really an X-Men member. Franklin is always with the Fantastic Four or Future Foundation, and while he spent some time on Krakoa prior to losing his powers and mutant status, still, once again, not an X-Men. Quicksilver is the closest that we've got, which is why I've included him at the impassioned behest of a good number of you. So Quicksilver is here for you. He's speeding on into the list. Quicksilver was never on the X-Men team, but was a member of one of the X-Factor teams. And while many people forget this fact as it's no longer considered, I guess, the most iconic iteration of the team, the X-Factor team, the original one anyways, was created to actually be a team for the original X-Men to be on when they made their return to the spotlight years later, but the name was already basically taken at that point by a newer team featuring sort of the next era of mutant heroes such as Wolverine, Rogue, and Storm. The version of the X-Factor team that Quicksilver was a part of was also a return to that original team's government-funded roots, which the first X-Factor team was government funded. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show your love for this channel in a different way, you can head on over to Facebook where you can give us a follow, give us a like, and do all the Facebooky things. Number 8. Ellison Stewart. Ellison Stewart was one of the founding members of the British Who, or at least one of the most important members of that organization, which also stands for the Weird Happenings Organization, I believe. As a result of her work, Ellison would often run into and team up with the Excalibur team. Later on, she ended up also being considered a member of the unofficial Muir Island X-Men team, as she aimed to help defend Muir Island from the Reavers. Ellison Stewart herself is just a normal human lady, not a mutant. She serves in the British Army where she holds the rank of Brigadier. Or at least, she did hold that rank. She's technically dead now. She was framed by a rival organization and later killed without much thought by Jamie Braddock while he was using his reality warping powers, as Jamie is wont to do. Number 7. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator, despite not being a mutant, actually attended the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning himself. On part 1 of this list, I talked about his sort of bodyguard turned school staff member Warbird, but I didn't make Q-Bark his own point. So here we go. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Calark, and as such can be extremely powerful due to his physiology and his heritage. However, as a kid, this kind of became a problem. At one point he destroyed half of the Shi'ar royal city Chandalar just because, well, he could. As such, his punishment was to go to Earth and learn how to better control and use his powers at the Jean Grey School, which I feel like he took as a punishment, but maybe Calark was also like, look, you just need to figure it out, okay? Can't just go destroying cities and such. Number 6. Deadpool. Deadpool definitely wasn't a member of the X-Men because they wanted him there. While Deadpool has a long history with the X-Force team, when it comes to the mainstay team of the X-Men, the mutant staple team at Marvel Comics, Deadpool was actually only permitted to be a kinda like an honorary member. I mean, he was given full membership, so technically he's a member. So that the X-Men could keep a closer eye on Wade, basically. Deadpool desperately was searching for his purpose in life and got it in his head that joining the X-Men was the best way for him to be a hero. He ended up leaving the X-Men team after helping them out with a problem that they believed he'd actually caused, but in reality he was kinda just like framed for. Well, I guess in the end, the X-Men kinda like kicked him off the team, but he also was gonna leave anyway. So there.
Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Quan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Z-Zorn, joined more than a few years later. Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team.
Number 3, Hepzibah. You might be familiar with Hepzibah if you are familiar or perhaps very familiar with the X-Men. Actually, Hepzibah isn't even really Hepzibah's real name, but we can't pronounce Hepzibah's real name, so just call her Hepzibah. She actually has a long history with the team of the X-Men, but also with an important family member of that team, namely Summer's patriarch, the father of Scott, Alex, and Gabriel, space pirate Corsair, or the father of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, if you rather. In fact, Hepzibah met Corsair in prison and helped to orchestrate the escape of those that would found the team known as the Starjammers. Hepzibah would go on to become very close to Corsair, and the two would even become lovers. She would team up with the X-Men multiple times during her comic book adventures, and even later join that team after Corsair's apparent death. Hepzibah is not a mutant though. She's an alien belonging to the race known as the Mephistozoids, who actually were prominent in the parts of space now known as part of the Shi'ar Empire, as they went to war with the Shi'ar and ultimately lost. And also later were basically labeled as savages by the Shi'ar, and they created propaganda to be like, they're all animals and they're all evil, which is pretty messed up. War is a messed up thing. Number 2, Lockheed. That's right, Lockheed might be out of this world, but not in the mutant sense. Lockheed is actually an alien who ended up enjoying the company of the X-Men, and specifically mutant and member Kitty Pryde, so much that he decided to leave his home and his people behind and go join the X-Men team. He often goes where Kitty does and is her loyal ally and companion, although he wasn't with her when she was in a bullet flying through space, but we'll talk about that more later. He has also been a double agent, staying with the X-Men while spying on them for Sword as a secret undercover agent, tasked with keeping an eye on the mutants and feeding information to Sword. He actually did this in exchange for Sword's help in regards to problems on his homeworld, so if you're thinking, wow, that's pretty shady, Lockheed, look, he had his reasons, okay? And you know what? Lockheed still really loves the X-Men. I don't think he was trying to do it to be malicious even. Lockheed was actually a fearsome warrior and hero among his own people, and he actually left his fiance to stay with Kitty and the X-Men, so he also gave up a lot just to hang out with them. I love Lockheed. I almost made him number 1. Number 1, Juggernaut. Juggernaut might be known as a villain to the X-Men, but he's also joined the team too. In fact, his story is actually pretty sad. He spent most of his life on the outside looking in a lot of respects. When it came to his family, where his father seemed to even prefer his stepson to Kane, and in regards to the mutant community, which Juggernaut's always kind of like been a part of, but not really, because he's not really a mutant, so he's kind of kept out. Which is maybe why he became a villain? I don't know. Charles was always a part of the mutant world, but even when Kane Marco became Juggernaut, kind of reaching out for his own power, he was shunned in a way by his brother for doing so. Charles Xavier may be seen as the original creator of the superhero team of the X-Men, but in some ways, he was very much a gatekeeper, at least for Juggernaut, even though I know it feels weird to say that about Charles, since he's kind of a guy that's supposed to be like, all mutants come in, but look, he's got issues. Sure, Juggernaut was the one with the vendetta against Charles originally, seeing Charles as abandoning him, but it always felt like rather than resolve that conflict, the two both just decided to battle against one another for like a really long time. Fortunately, as time has worn on, things have changed between them. Juggernaut has changed, he's served both as a villain as well as an ally, and even team member when it comes to the X-Men, and recently in the comics he's taken charge of his own power, going from being an avatar in essence of Cyttorak to being an anti-hero who serves only the causes he himself believes in, no longer tied to the will of Cyttorak. And he's got that cool new armor too. Still made from Cyttorak materials, but he's not like tied to him anymore because it wasn't given to him. Ha! Take that, Cyttorak! Juggernaut can be a hero too.
Starting off at number 10, we have Forget-Me-Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know. Mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget-Me-Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget-Me-Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget-Me-Not's existence. Clearly that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got Iboy. Why is a guy named Iboy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again. Number 7. Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself. But of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor. And obviously she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabby Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine. Number 6! It's Synch. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022.
Number 5. Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Kavita Rao is an important ally and friend to mutant kind, who was once a very misguided and powerful enemy. She attempted to cure the legacy virus when it was running rampant, but failed to do so before Beast Hank McCoy did. Later, she was then approached to create a cure for the mutant gene, with the understanding that it would not be used by force, but would simply be given to those that wanted it, people whose powers were basically super dangerous and had potentially even ruined their lives in some cases. Dr. Rao decided to accept the task. She successfully created a serum which turned mutants into humans. The cure was named Hope. After it was revealed that whole plot was about exterminating mutant kind, Dr. Rao submitted to the will of the X-Men. They destroyed her research, with only Hank keeping the last sample of the Hope serum. In the end, her villainous actions later inspired Dr. Rao to set down a path of redemption after the events of M-Day. She joined a team of scientists brought together by Beast to help bring back mutant kind. Dr. Rao would remain working with and alongside the X-Men throughout their Utopia days, and was later a staff member for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 4. Dupe. Despite Dupe being a glorious weirdo, he's never really been confirmed as a mutant. We don't really know what exactly Dupe is. He is either a mutant or some kind of possibly alien or being from another dimension, but the bottom line is it's never been explicitly verified and set in stone what his origin is. And honestly, this is Dupe we're talking about, so I don't think it ever will be. As a result of all that, he's a candidate for this list, despite being maybe one of the weirdest teammates, mutant or no. Dupe has had many adventures with the X-Men and was even the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, joining up with and aiding Wolverine there. He's also been seen on Krakoa since then. It's clear that Dupe feels most at home among mutants, and that is a place where he gets to be, even if he isn't a mutant.
Number 3. Bloodstorm. This is probably a bit of a spicy choice for this list. Bloodstorm is none other than Aurora Monroe, only she is from a different universe. Earth 21710 to be specific. This version of Aurora was a thief living in the streets of Egypt when she attempted to pickpocket a man who turned out to be Dracula. She was turned into a vampire and eventually managed to free herself from Dracula's control and find new purpose among the X-Men. Unfortunately for her though, her thirst for blood overpowered her, which resulted in her ending at least both Beast and Professor X. But it could have been more. She was recruited by the Goblin Queen of Earth 91240 as one of her Hexmen, and they invaded Earth 616, where Bloodstorm decided to switch sides and help the time-displaced X-Men Blue team. She was eventually recruited to the team by Cyclops. Now this is obviously Aurora Monroe, and even if she is from another universe, she is still extremely powerful. But on top of that, she has all the powers of vampires vampirism, including being capable of transforming her body into mist and a flock of bats, and using her gaze to hypnotize people into doing her bidding. Number 2. Genesis. Honestly, don't know how y'all are gonna feel about this one. Evan Sabanur was created by Phantom X as a clone of Apocalypse, and as such has a lot of his powers, including superhuman strength, superhuman durability, and self-molecular manipulation, meaning Evan has total control over the molecular structure of his own body, enabling him to alter his form at will. He is able to transform his limbs into various weapons and equipment, such as blades and bludgeons for combat, or rocket boots for flight, as well as being able to alter his body to change in size. Evan also has a healing factor that can regenerate from serious injury like getting gashed by Daken's claws. And he can adapt his body to any disease or environment at will, and sometimes subconsciously. Another small, innocent ability Evan has is the potential for virtually any conceivable superhuman power ever. He once showcased fire or plasma breath when fighting Faithful John's mind drones, and also has a degree of energy projection, able to project dematerializer blasts from his eyes and emit energy blasts from his hands. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Force number 7 in 2011, but wasn't on the X-Men team until 2014, and even then, kind of as a student. As the clone of Apocalypse, Evan will potentially develop any of the powers possessed by him, but it also means people do fear him, which leaves him with a bit of an insecurity. And number 1, Darwin. Even somewhat casual fans of the X-Men know who Darwin is, if only because he was that guy who is supposed to be able to adapt to anything but gets de-lifed in like 2 seconds in the X-Men First Class movie. People were mad. And honestly, yeah, so was I. That makes no sense. Adapt to this, shut up. He literally could have. Armando Munoz, or Darwin, was first introduced in X-Men Deadly Genesis number 2 in December of 2005, and he would join the X-Men shortly after that. Darwin's powers are just the coolest. He's able to adapt to any situation, so basically, using his powers, he's been able to grow functioning gills after being submerged in water, gain night vision after being in the dark for several seconds, be able to survive without oxygen when in space, his skin has become fireproof when it's exposed to flames, and after touching Hela, Darwin became a death deity and gained powers similar to Hela, including immortality, Asgardian physiology, and control over life and death. There was even a time his intelligence increased itself to understand the Shi'ar language by looking at it in written form, although sometimes his powers do not always take the effect he wants, like, for example, during his fight with the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle rather than supplying a power that would actually allow him to defeat the Hulk, which is kind of hilarious, to be honest. Coming in at number 10, it's Pickles. I think his name alone just made me want to include him on this list. Pickles is what is known as a Bamf, a race of demons who are basically little Nightcrawler-like imps, who possess similar attributes and powers as Nightcrawler and Azazel. Pickles himself lived inside Beast's van and was a backup in case anyone needed immediate transport somewhere, but he would later travel with Jean Grey and the X-Men in Jean Grey number 1 from 2017. As a Bamf, Pickles can teleport by displacing himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it, and then return to the original dimension at a certain distance from the point of departure. But unlike Nightcrawler, Pickles doesn't require foreknowledge of his destination in order to safely teleport there. But much like Nightcrawler, Pickles can stick to objects with the surface of his hands and feet, and he's got a sweet little prehensile tail. This little imp also possesses an unknown degree of muscle memory mimicry, which enables him to quickly learn and perform new martial arts with little instruction or training. He's definitely one of those few minor X-Men characters, but he's just so cute. Number 9. Gazing Nightshade. First appearing in X-Men Blue number 6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade was part of a ruthless mutant vigilante group who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. The group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow, fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. I mean, that's not the coolest thing. She joins Polaris' makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue number 25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Number 8. Trinary. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red #1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the biggest earning CEOs in India. That's pretty cool. And while I think that's awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology, such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Her limitation at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. It just remains to be seen. Number 7. Gabby Kinney. We included Laura Kinney on the last list, so is it cheating to use her clone? I personally say no, because Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger and recently Scout, is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and crazy regenerative healing factor, and that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine #2 in 2015, and she had a long history that, just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister, and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red #1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout, and one of the main Wolverine family members. Oh, also her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared an immediate bond, and he is basically her pet, which is both really cool and kind of hilarious. Number 6. Gentle. Although Nesno Abidemi, son of a Wakandan woman and a Russian man, first appeared in 2006, he was only a student at the Xavier Institute until he joined the X-Men in 2009's Uncanny X-Men. Because of his father, Gentle was never treated right in Wakanda, even by his own mom, which is a little hypocritical because, you know, she got pregnant with a dude, but whatever. He was raised at the Wakandan royal court and was sent to the Xavier Institute by Aurora Monroe when his powers first manifested. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle with a Sentinel, and his strength is said to rival Colossus, with his resting strength increasing every time he uses his powers. Because of his poor treatment though, he suffered from psychological trauma, which caused him to suffer great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive, with the added side effect of looking sick.
Number 5. Cerebra. I know, so many Cerebs on this list, but what do you expect? These are vital members of these teams either way you slice it. Cerebro was a much more loyal member of the X-Men team in the end in comparison to Cerebro. She was created from the remains of Cerebro and was an AI built by X-Men Forge. Cerebra ended up teaming up with the X-Men on various adventures and even fought alongside them to protect the young mutants of their current school, X-Haven, when it was attacked by demons. See, X-Haven existed within Limbo, but magic had put up defenses to shield it. However, then those ended up failing, and hence the demons attacked. Hence Cerebra defending the school. Cerebra made her first appearance in Extraordinary X-Men issue #1. Number 4. Energizer. Katie Power is a member of the Power Pack, who goes by the superhero name Energizer. The Power Pack are a team of kid superheroes who also all happen to be siblings, the children of James and Margaret Power, who got their powers from a dying alien seeking to protect the Earth, and the children specifically in an altercation, which is also sadly how they died. Katie ended up getting made an honorary X-Men in the pages of the 90s issue of the Uncanny X-Men, volume #1, issue 195. Here Katie teams up with the X-Men to save her siblings from the Morlocks, who have taken basically all the kids and manipulated their memories and appearance so they believe they're actually like children of Morlock and Elite. Katie is given a jacket by Kitty Pryde in the issue and made an honorary X-Men as she joins the team to go down into the sewers and rescue her siblings. Also, don't worry, the siblings get rescued. I love the Power Pack. The Power Pack is like just an adorable, just wholesome, fun time.
Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men #1 in 2012 when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she is a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Number 2, Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1. Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men.
Number 10. Warbird. While not a specific member of the core team, Warbird was a member of the Jean Grey School. In fact, she was considered a member of the faculty of sorts. She arrived with Kid Gladiator when he came to attend the school. She also fought on a few separate occasions to protect the school and its students, namely of them Kid Gladiator. Warbird herself is not a mutant but a member of the Shi'ar alien race and was born to be a fierce warrior, which indeed she is. Warbird is as much her codename as it is her rank in the Shi'ar's forces. Warbirds are considered elite warriors in the Shi'ar Empire who are basically bred and trained from birth to be the best of the best. Number 9. Dagger. Dagger was recruited alongside Cloak to join the Dark X-Men, Hammer and Norman Osborn's supplemental mutant team. Although Cloak and Dagger are technically not mutants, but they were considered, I guess, mutant enough. The history of the retcons involving their origin are long and quite inconsistent, and I've talked about it at length before in other videos. At one point they were considered mutants and on and off have been considered as such in the comics, but ultimately it seems they're considered to be simply believed to have been mutants while their powers actually came from exposure to experimental drugs. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show your love for us by heading on over to Facebook, clicking that follow, clicking that like. We're gonna have some exciting new content coming your way over there, so you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8. Cloak. Cloak also joined the Dark X-Men with Dagger, but previous to that, the duo had adventures as well with the Power Pack and the New Mutants back in the day. Being not specifically X-Men team members, but at least, X-Men adjacent. And as I said, their origin has been debated throughout their comic book history. So while we don't mainly consider them mutants, they were mutant enough for Osborn to call on for his X-Men team. Beast has even said before that even the results of the tests that they have done so far on the duo have been considered not enough to be conclusive in his mind. At least not as far as, Hank is concerned. Although it should be noted that the tests have pointed to them thus far not being mutant, at least with where we're at now in terms of their current origins. But of course, like I said, it's gone back and forth for a long time, so could always change again. Who knows? Number 7. Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel ranks a little lower because technically she was referred to as a mutant at one point, but she is also very much a Sentinel, and a person turned into a Sentinel no less. And I guess because of that she's considered unique enough in regards to her journey and makeup to be considered, I guess, a mutant Sentinel. I don't really understand how that works, but yeah, that was a label that was mentioned in the 2004 Excalibur series in issue number 6, so I mean, it's out there. We gotta acknowledge it. I still am like, though, I feel like if you're a mutant and you're a Sentinel, it feels a little contradictory to me. Karima Sharpander was actually once just a normal human woman, a police officer who actually almost fell in love with a mutant. She ended up being kidnapped and turned into a cyborg Sentinel sleeper agent by Bastion. She activated, but would later be deprogrammed and then somehow end up disassembled after that, only to be reassembled by Beast and then asked to join the X-Men, which she did in 2006 in issue 192 of the 1991 X-Men series. Since then, though, Omega Sentinel has gone back to being extremely Sentinel in nature, with her acting as a major antagonist in the 2021 Inferno series and pretty much everything leading up to that in very modern comics last few years. Number 6. Cerebro. Yeah, and Cerebro wasn't just a member either. They actually had their own team of X-Men that they were the leader of. Cerebro ended up gaining sentience and set out to catalog all mutants on Earth. That seems nice, but not in this way. They wanted to catalog those mutants by kidnapping them and then keeping them in basically like cryogenic pods. I guess as one does. I mean, I guess what else did we expect Cerebro to do when they became sentient, right? Finding and recording mutants was pretty much all they knew prior to that. Cerebro ended up creating their own X-Men team and leading it, although ultimately the real X-Men did have to come in and put a stop to their crazy schemes. And of course we also found out that Cerebro's X-Men were actually nanotech beings that they had created. But either way you look at this one, whether or not you consider Cerebro's team to be official enough, Cerebro themselves in a way was a member of the X-Men originally, they just didn't have sentience back in the day. But Cerebro has been around since almost day one when it comes to the main team and original roster. Might not be exactly day one, but it's pretty close to day one, I want to say. I can't remember if Cerebro's in issue number 1, but it's close.
Number 5. Oya. When Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X gene and abilities activated. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. Ide Okonkwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta State when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope, and with the consent of Cyclops, the Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Idea's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold and cold to generate heat, and vice versa. Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010. Number 4. Armor. Hisako Ichiki lived in Tokyo, Japan with her brother and parents when her mutant abilities activated, and she joined the Xavier Institute. She first appeared becoming just a student and member of Kitty Pryde's Paladin Squad in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 in 2004, and would go on to become a member of the New X-Men after participating in Emma Frost's Battle Royale in New X-Men Volume 2 number 23 and 26. But finally, she officially joined the main X-Men team in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 number 25 in 2008. Hisako's powers are pretty cool. As you might suspect from her name, Armor can generate generates strong, powerful, durable, and impenetrable psionic exoskeleton armor around her entire physical body that augments her strength, endurance, stamina, agility, invulnerability, and durability. The power of her abilities are greatly tied to her family and bloodline. So, for example, the strength, power, and size of her psionic armor greatly enhances when her relatives pass away. Which, I mean, if she was a villain, that could go south pretty quick. But luckily she's not, so we're good.
Number 3. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton is the adopted sister of mutant and X-Men member Nightcrawler. She is also one of Kurt's major love interests. Yeah, it's complicated. Amanda was actually an alias that she adopted when she went to investigate what her adopted brother Kurt was up to after the death of their brother Steven was kinda pinned on Kurt. Undercover, Jermaine Zardos, which is her real name, became Amanda Sefton, and it was during this time that Kurt would actually fall in love with her, not recognizing, I don't think, that Amanda was his sister Jermaine at the time. At least, I'm pretty sure he didn't recognize that. I'm not sure if she really even changed her appearance, so it's a whole weird thing. Jermaine, or Amanda as we more commonly know her now, is a powerful sorceress, but is not a mutant, and has been an ally to the X-Men, also belonging to their unofficial Muir Island team. Number 2. SpiderMan. SpiderMan has been a longtime friend to the mutants. Although they initially got off on the wrong foot when they first ran into each other in the comics, they eventually realized that they were both on the side of good and ended up becoming friends and allies. Spider-Man in the 90s animated series even goes to the X-Men for help, hoping they can actually cure him, but only to learn that Professor X isn't so much about curing anyone as he is about helping mutants find their place and their way. There is also the matter of the fact that Spider-Man isn't really even that kind of mutant. He's considered a mutate, having his genetic makeup altered by that radioactive spider bite, and possibly also by his fate to become Spider-Man as a preordained spider totem in the web of life and destiny, which is also a thing. Spider-Man at one point isn't just a member of the team, he actually has his own team of mutants that he himself is responsible for teaching. How cool is that? Special class. Number 1. Longshot. While some might think of Longshot as a mutant, he doesn't consider himself as such. He is believed to be the clone and possibly both the father and son of Shatterstar. Things get weird in the Mojoverse, and Longshot is basically kind of a paradoxical time loop in and of himself in terms of him and his heritage. As is Shatterstar in some ways, and kind of as is Spiral as well too. Shatterstar himself is a genetically engineered mutant, and Longshot is a clone of him, but despite that tie to sort of mutantdom or mutant kind, albeit a genetically engineered version of mutant kind, he doesn't consider himself to be a mutant. Longshot was instantly liked by the X-Men when they first found him, and ended up joining the team in fighting back against Mojo. Initially, he didn't actually remember who he was or much about himself, and spent a good amount of time on those first adventures with the X-Men team trying to recover his own lost memories.